Here we are.
We're back.
I think we're back for now.
Hello to everybody that is watching our fifth. And what number are we? Are we on episode
6.
episode 6? Oh, look at that. So welcome to everybody. You want to say a couple of things to people as we start, just as reminders.
Yeah, I said this last week. Just reminders to people that, like, I know sometimes it can be a little, hey, John K. It can be a little wonky as far as, like, when you're trying to comment and things like that. I know I was even speaking to my dad about this. Sometimes those of you that maybe aren't as tech savvy, when you're trying to, type in a question and you're thinking about it and we're discussing things and maybe it seems as if we've moved on. I don't know if I need to be closer. Seems as if we've moved on. Don't worry about that. Like, type in the question, even if it takes you 5 or 10 minutes to formulate your thought, type it in. The whole point of this is we're discussing things for the sake of, like, the flow. We are not just going to pause for like a super long time. We'll keep going, but we'll come back to it and we'll discuss the questions and we'll discuss your answers and your thoughts. We really enjoy your feedback and we want your feedback. So it helps us. That's the whole point of this. We want to have this kind of be as if you were sitting here around the table with us. So please use this platform and share with us too. So don't feel weird if it just comes at a later time and we'll cycle back to it. So, yeah.
Why don't we start with actually just this, so people can just state what's something from Sunday's message that stood out to you, if you just want, or something that you would love to hear us discuss and talk about, just to chime in with that right away, and then we can use that a little bit to guide us through this conversation for the next 45 minutes, an hour, however long we go. What are you going to say, Tom?
Well, John G was just commenting on the intro video, and we have to give kudos to Lisa for developing that.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, so. we're becoming a real deal here. Yes. So just stay tuned and watch for the amount of viewers as it skyrockets over the next.
That's if YouTube allows us to stay up. I put up the splash screen that said we're going to go live in 15 minutes or whatever, and YouTube took it down for violating community guidelines. So
without having any content yet.
Yeah, I had no content except we're going on. So who knows how long this will last? We'll see.
We'll hope for the best. So let's start. Why don't we talk about some of the topics that came up on Sunday with the message? What's something, Lisa, for you that stood out
with the message on Sunday?
Yeah.
Well, we actually, I mean, the first thing that kind of stood out for me initially was a little bit, I mean, the theme was more on humility. But for me, the first thing that I thought about initially was, what is humility? Like, even just defining it. Mm-hmm. Even when we started talking about it, because it just seems like, okay, well, we use that word all the time, whatever, to have to be humble, humility. But even just to define what that is, for me, wasn't just right away something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's actually a great point. It's a term a lot of people use. Be humble, having humility.
Having humility is, yeah.
So we would like to turn to one of the experts here.
And usually people think that humility would mean putting yourself down a little bit, putting yourself beneath.
Yeah.
And so it would be not making a lot about yourself, not puffing, not boasting, not bragging. And so you would think then that kind of humility is when you think, I'm not really all that. I'm not really all that much. And I really shouldn't speak up because I have nothing to say. It can parallel then, in that mindset, it can parallel insecurity. It can parallel self-deprecation. It can parallel self-pity. But what's interesting about those words that we just used is the self in them. Humility isn't about yourself. Humility isn't self anything. Humility is about others. And so humility is about seeing others and seeing God. That's basically what it is. It's obeying the 2 greatest commandments: love God and love your neighbor. Humility is, how do I move in? How do I serve? How do I get closer? How do I come towards them? How do I elevate them? How do I honor them? How do I support them? How do I raise them? And so it's not about thinking less of yourself. This is a common expression, but it always works. It's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less.
Yeah.
So you're not thinking of yourself, you're thinking of others. You're not thinking of what can I do, what can I get, what can I have, how can I help me? You're thinking of others, and I want to be about you. I want to be for you, and I want to be someone who is helping you and understanding you and standing with you.
Or
And
or with that even, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable.
when you think that, which is a form of pride,
Yeah.
I'm not good
It's
enough,
not being
I'm not
humble.
capable, I'm this, I'm when you think that, you withdraw from people. Humility moves this way, and that's what we saw in our text yesterday morning in Philippians 1 in Philippians 2. Let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God, considered equality with God not something to be held on to, but made himself humble, and took upon himself the form of a servant, of a man, and humbled himself to the cross. Humility moves towards people. If you find yourself withdrawing, if you find yourself separating, if you find yourself in a situation where it's kind of like,
Being
you guys do your
disconnected.
thing, if you find
Disconnect.
yourself isolated,
Yeah.
then there's usually something other than humility that's going on.
Yeah.
Humility moves towards,
Moves towards.
I
pride
that's a good way to
withdraws.
put it. That's I really like that definition. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Not definition, but
That-
explanation.
Yeah,
No, it's good.
moves towards. That's actually really helpful.
So
Yeah.
if you don't draw in, if you don't experience that closeness, if you don't have desire for that, and you find yourself just removing, it's most likely there's something else that's going on underneath, which is not humility, which would be the opposite, is pride.
So in pride, you're thinking about yourself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be thinking about yourself as in, I am awesome. I am great. I'm smarter than any of these people. I am the best person here. I'm the only one that anybody should be talking to. You could be narcissistic, which is the ultimate of that.
We don't know
Or,
any examples of that either in society.
well, thankfully, none of us are ever like
Ever
that.
way. Yeah.
But quite often I actually am, where I'm arrogant, and it's like, well, you just don't understand how awesome I am. I can think that to myself from time to time, even though I would rarely say that. But it also works the other way too, where we're thinking, I'm terrible. I, everybody knows that I'm just a sham. I'm a fake. I I blew it. I shouldn't really live. I shouldn't take up space. I. And
Yeah.
so both of those are forms of pride. And
If they're
humility
just
is
on
you.
Yeah, so they're just on opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's opposite side, flip sides of the same coin.
Yeah, or that.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit just before, and I was remembering the first time. Well, one of the very times it was quite put in my face about how prideful I actually am, and I remember actually coming up to you, Tom, or you approached me, and I had been speaking the previous week, and you hadn't been there, and you said to me, well, so how did your speaking engagement go? And I said, oh, well, it wasn't really good, and I should have done this, and I didn't do enough of this. And I was expecting inside for you to say, oh, I'm sure it was actually a lot better than you think, Ashley, and do you really think that's like a fair assessment, and all of these kinds of things. And instead, I guess you saw this as an inroad, an entry point, and it did work. You said, yeah, sometimes my own insecurity gets to me as well. And I was furious. I was so mad. Actually, those were back in my days of kickboxing. And so I went to the gym, and the coach is holding the focus mitts for me, and I'm just punching away at the focus mitts, and I start yelling, pride. Is that insecurity? Like,
Yeah, actually, I said to you, if you recall, I said, yeah, I get proud like that too. And
Oh,
it
you
makes me
did, yeah.
insecure like that.
At the end.
It's my pride does that too. And you were just like,
You thought I was going to punch you.
yeah.
Yeah. But that was actually a great moment where I just began to think about pride and insecurity. That it's the same thing. I'd never thought about that. And I had always thought, oh, just don't boast. Just don't speak too much. Think of yourself as less. And then you're being humble. I don't know. Do you have any experiences like this, Lisa?
I know. I was trying to think of them earlier, but I'm so humble that I don't have any. I'm kidding.
I'm
kidding.
Oh, no. Don't.
No, but I mean, it honestly was more when I started to hang out with you, Ashley, like 10 plus years ago, was more my entry point to be kind of going, wait a second, I have pride here. It was really the beginning of our relationship where I started to discover that, because I discovered it with you, Tom, but it was more through the Smashing of Idols, that workshop that we did, CFM, things like that, where I really start to dig. But I think it was in the friendship with you, Ashley, where I started to realize, whoa, I have pride in my relationships with people, and I'm not just this, I've got it all, together, and I make the right
Yeah.
call all the time, and all those kind of things. Like, it was definitely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to put it out to people. Have you noticed any ways that your pride creeps up in your life, or what does it say to you? What do you think about? What are you hearing? And maybe have you become more aware of that in the last couple of days? If you have any thoughts on that, chime in for sure.
And there's something that always goes along with humility, and it's in the text that I was using on Sunday, because again, as our example of humility, the greatest example we have is Jesus and his incarnation. And I've said this like 3 or 4 times already in our Philippians study, but that was ultimate empathy. So incarnation is Jesus moving in, fully taking on himself humanity, fully taking on himself us. So empathy, which is that, right? Getting into somebody's life, getting into their shoes, experiencing with them, feeling with them. Empathy and humility go together, and lack of empathy and pride go together. So if you find yourself in a situation where it's difficult to have empathy, it's a signal that humility isn't happening right now. Pride is happening, even if it's not pride of I'm too good for this. It may be pride of I can't help you. I'm not enough to help you. And that leaves Jesus out of the equation, where empathy takes Jesus, follows our ultimate example, and moves towards.
Mhm.
So humility is always moving into people, into situations, into love, and into empathy.
Any questions that have popped up or thoughts?
Oh, just Karen saying hi.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
So it's a quiet group, but chime in. Feel free. Don't be afraid to.
John K has something.
Oh, I'm in meetings at work where I often get frustrated and think I'm the smartest person in the room. Perhaps that's a bit of I.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of it, right? Where if everybody was as smart as me, if everybody wasn't so dumb, we'd be getting a lot more done or a lot more accomplished. I mean, there's levels of intelligence, not saying that, but it's the whole mentality of it can separate you from actually what's going on and what's happening and even solving the problem.
Yeah.
And moves you somewhere else.
Have we frozen up? Is everyone seeing a frozen picture? Could you chime in? It's not? Okay. It is frozen on mine, but that's fine.
I do this kind of even in my, a lot in my parenting. Like I've said that, I think I said this even a couple after hours before that we've done, that I do the whole, I'll sit at my kitchen sink sometimes doing dishes, or stand there and I'm doing my dishes and I'm thinking, if I've had a hard day with the kids, my thoughts often go to I. It's like, what do I need to do? I need to be a better mom with this. I need to get on top of this. I need to this if it's been a hard day. I just need to be better at this. I need to get this more in line. I need to be this kind of mom. My kids are behaving like this because I didn't do this. And so much of it is me. It's all on me. And it's what we're going to get to, what you're going to get to, Ashley, is it then changes the system, the dynamic, and how I treat the kids, and how I then look at them, and how I behave even in my family dynamic, when my mindset is I. It's not moving towards anymore. So I actually, in a sense, pull back.
Yeah, so you just said this word.
Yeah.
I mean, let's go there right now, and then we'll talk about the antidote to all of this. Unless you want to say something else.
Because I know where you're going. So just before you get there, I wanna just say that there's a kind of a refrain. There's a song. There's like a melody that keeps playing in your head when you did that. It was my kids are this. I'm too tired. I'm frustrated. And so the I becomes a song of that leads to anger, it leads to withdrawal and anger, and I'm too tired. And we hardly ever get to that same place with humility because it's like, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And and it gets interrupted. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a song. It's a story. It's
there you go.
another word that we use a lot in an approach in psychology. Will say it creates a system that's at play. So we were going to do in a couple of weeks' time from now, and we're probably going to have to adjust it. But we were calling it dysfunctional's welcome, and we were going to look at systems and how do we interrupt those systems. Coming back to what you just mentioned, and what are the tools that we actually have, which comes back to what we heard on Sunday in terms of what we've received and who we are. But now, just using that example that you said, Lisa, you have, if you go with and I'm not good enough, and you start to feel that and you start to believe that, how do you find that? What are all those pieces? Play that out just a tiny bit for people. What are those pieces that start to unfold?
Well, it just it impairs how I behave with my children. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to experience joy with your children. It's hard to experience um, like enjoyment. It's even hard to like make decisions
Yeah.
and know what to do and how to, like, you think it's going to create, I'm really going to know what to do. But it's almost like fear comes over even more and you're like paralyzed and you're going, now what do I do? And your greatest attempt in that is to try to figure everything out. That's always my thing. I'm going to figure it all out. And the result is even more chaos because I can't figure it all out, and it's all on me. It's all, I got to do this. I have to figure it out. I have to sort
Me.
this out. It's all on me, and it's the pride again. It's like
What happens with John? How do you start to feel towards John?
it's well, there'll be anger, there'll be frustration, there'll be we need to do this, there'll be whatever you name
Yeah,
it.
like
It's
maybe you're not contributing, you're not helping,
everything.
whatever you go to, and that kind
Yeah.
of thinking. And then your kids start to interact with that.
Mhm.
And what happens with Erica and Landon? We're totally picking on you, but you can pick on me after.
You could just say, I don't know, Ashley, what do you think would happen with
Yeah,
Eric?
exactly. Like, what do you? But it's so funny because they totally feed off that too, and you start to, and I started to notice, right, and I'll start to go, whoa, wait a second, it's like this tailspin of everything going on. I'm like, you
Yeah.
know, and I really started to, and that's why I even said, like I said this even before, I said this at one of our after hours, I put like a sticky note, like when we talked about tools, I actually put it like by my sink and put like am I, like, or am I, and then I did dot 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 is he, like, I to try to, it's that this is where you're
Shift.
going, but shift that system of way of thinking, because that spin will happen and that chaos will happen when my mind goes there, my heart goes there,
Mm-hmm.
right, as opposed to stopping it and going, wait a second,
Right. Exactly.
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's this psychological concept, right? And there's a response to it from psychology, but obviously the greater one comes from the gospel because it misses the pieces. But it's basically saying that essentially, when we're caught up in ourselves and our own pride and our lack of humility, then we're going to interact, whether we initiate this system, or we perpetuate it and what we do, we interact with all of these pieces and what's taking place. And that's where you come down to dysfunctional families, dysfunctional individuals, which is essentially all of us. And those are usually the moments when people say, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to be a mom. I can't make this work in my marriage. Just got to cut off this relationship. I got to leave my job. There's another system. Or let's go hereafter, or screw the government. Because there's a system that's at play there. Those kind of responses are because we're interacting in something. We're unaware of what's actually happening internally, and that's where we're going. You want to say something to that?
So John says, John G, he says, it's hard to turn from me to Jesus, 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 Jesus. So what is going to help us disrupt that system that we formed, where we have kind of colored, kind of influenced the way we're operating and everything that we're operating in, and we have our system, and we have this and that, and we realize that it's faulty. We realize it's wrong. What are the tools that help us disrupt it,
Mm.
break
Well,
into it?
what else? What was the next thing you pulled from the message on Sunday? Because it was probably that piece too.
I'm trying to remember.
Well, you talked first about how Tommy, you're talking about how Jesus is the ultimate example, right?
Oh, like and how we can't. Yeah, that was the big thing. Is if he's the ultimate example and we're to follow in his example, we can't. It's crushing. Like if we're to go, okay, so he's the example and be like him.
Yeah,
Be humble as he is humble.
yeah. You're not going to do. Well, I do a pretty bad job.
That's like, yeah. But it's sorry, I'm not.
No, go ahead.
You say what you're.
Well, what do
gonna
you
say.
pull into that? You pull in that he's not just our example, right? He's our savior.
Exactly.
And so he is our example, but he's more than that. And so he has given us an example of humility, but he's also accomplished humility for us, and he's rescued us. So he's delivered us. So that's the gospel. So it's the gospel. What has Jesus done? What has he accomplished? And that's the tool that we bring into every situation. When you find yourself disconnecting, when you find yourself angry, when you find yourself a little bit like out of alignment, like I don't understand these people, I don't understand the system, I can't touch it, everything's buzzing, it's like I'm in two different worlds. You realize that you have something that needs the gospel. You have something where you have to bring. Excuse me. Go ahead, actually.
No. I think it's perfect. There's a misconception about who you are and who Jesus is. You're believing something about who you are in the minute and who Jesus is, and it's most likely not accurate if your emotions are out of whack, or um, if you just find you can't have any kind of peace, or you're afraid, or you're angry, to name some of them, or you're not empathetic. If you can't touch any of those things, or if you're drawing away, coming back to that initial thought on humility, how humility draws in, then there's something we're not believing, and we're not trusting that Jesus has actually done for us. So we're trying to achieve it ourselves.
So if I'm thinking, things are going pretty good. I think I got finally a measure of everything sorted out at home and at work, and everything's just kind of hunky dory. But I do find myself without empathy. I do find myself really not caring very much about.
Or thinking everybody else is ridiculous, right?
Um, there's a that's kind of a sign. That's taking your temperature. That says you're running a fever. Things aren't as hunky dory as you think. Um, Humility has been broken, and you need to bring the gospel into this situation, even if it's going to disrupt the family. And the gospel disrupts. You said this 2 weeks ago. We often tease you about it, right? About how the gospel disrupted your life. It disrupted your life. It disrupted my life. I think everybody, it comes, but this is the only way that we can heal that system. So
That's at play. So when you take your example, right, and you stop just thinking me, and you kind of said this already, what do you start to think? And then how does that impact what you do?
Yeah, I think to disrupt it, even when we were talking here and we're talking about humility, I was thinking how Tom said on Sunday, the gospel 2-step. I liked how he said, we read Philippians 1, then we read Philippians 2. We go, the first step is Philippians 1. What did he do? Second step is Philippians 2. This is now how we can live freely out of that. It's always.
You said, Lisa, I don't know, was it on After Hours or was it just sometime you and I were talking? You said when you were growing up, you had the WWJD bracelet.
I did have one of those.
What would Jesus do, right?
Yes.
That was a big craze back in the last century when you were growing up, right? What would Jesus do? And the idea is I got to follow Jesus. I got to figure out what he would do, and he's an example for me, and I got to follow the example. It would have been good to have that if we'd also had another bracelet that was above it or first or whatever, that was what did
Did
Jesus
Jesus
do?
do?
W
I
D
know.
D G D J D, yeah, whatever.
I
What
know.
did Jesus do? And then on the
So
basis
true.
of that, what can I do?
Yeah.
So
And that made me think of it because today I actually went back and I read Philippians 1 and then 2, and I tried to get that feeling, that sense of like, don't be crushed by this call to humility. Think about what did he do first?
cool,
Because we don't need to be crushed by that.
cool.
We can think about what has he done. And even when you were describing humility, it's us moving towards, and it made me think of he's always moving towards me. There's never a time when he's not moving towards me. So then if that's always true, then I can. So it's that again, that like him first, then me. You know what I mean? Him first. So then that relates to even thinking about the day with the kids, the parenting, all that. It's like I don't have to do the I. It's like no, he's moving towards me. He's loving me first. He's got me first. It's okay. Like he's done this for me first. He's the champion here. He's on the throne. He's the king. You're not. You don't have to be. He loves like it replaces all of that.
And then you are actually able to start doing that.
Exactly. But the weight is off and it's like you can breathe.
And when it comes to humility, that's
yeah.
where we are always kind of we joke about it, right? That if you think you become humble, that's when you're not. Humility is unobtainable, but it isn't. Jesus proves it. Jesus proves that humility is real. But what he does is he says, I'm gonna move into your life. I'm gonna incarnate
Yeah.
for you, and then you and I are gonna move into someone else's life. And so we have that. We're all terrible at moving towards. And even as we just as you came in our door tonight, you said you were just reminding us that one of your greatest fears all your life was being abandoned, having people go away. I think all of us can share in that. I was abandoned accidentally when I was 3 or something, and spent the night in the woods by myself as a little 3-year-old boy. And it was for the rest of my life. It was like that sense of don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. We all have that, and the gospel comes and says, I'm never going to leave you. I am never going to abandon you. And because of that, there's an invigoration of that I can help people. I can do that. And that's what we do in the church. That's what we do at Bethel. That's what we do with each other. We say, I'm not leaving you. I'm never going to quit. I'm never going to quit. And so that Jesus heals and helps.
So humility is like we could say it's never moving towards someone alone,
It's true. That's good.
which is kind of cool.
That's cool.
That's really awesome. I was gonna say, and this just picks up on what you're saying, Tom. But so you look at the system that's happening and the interaction, and then you go, how do we disrupt this? And we disrupt it by bringing back the gospel to it, like we were just talking about. But then you just say that you can move towards people, and you can move towards people with Jesus as well. But one of the things that happens then with that is you can't always change everybody that's interacting in your system. So you can't necessarily you can't change Erica, you can't change Landon, you can't change John in just your family system that's interacting there. But what you can do is you can change what you believe about the situation, what you believe about them, and how you're going to interact with them. And I think that's really, really powerful just to start to even see that. So when we're in the midst of any kind of system, we actually hold the tool and the power through Jesus to then begin to interact with it, regardless of what everybody else does. We talked about this just briefly on a much broader sense, because I was saying one of the things that has been coming to my mind more and more is that there's a massive system that's at play that we don't have any control over, and that's actually COVID-19, and even the rules and the regulations and what's being enforced by the government. We can't change that. We have to operate within it. But what we can change and what we can disrupt is how we're going to deal with that exchange that's at play. Any thoughts on that?
What do you mean the exchange? What do you mean by that?
Well, right now I'm forbidden to see people. I have to be very careful. There has to be social distancing. I have to be respectful of where other people are at, right? So even if somebody is comfortable with me sitting out on their deck, others aren't going to be. So I live with these restrictions. I go to the grocery store right now and I have to line up 2 meters behind people everywhere. There's all of these restrictions. So what am I going to believe about that situation?
Okay.
What am I going to believe in the midst of those moments? I'm forbidden. I'm not liked. I'm not allowed. My freedom is gone. Or even what's interesting in the mind with people is we start to think they don't want to see me. They're not really interested in me anymore.
Right.
They don't really like me. We're not really close anymore. We're disconnected. That phrase of disconnect, you see it everywhere. You see it all the time on social media. So then we're interacting with this system that's enforced, starting to cultivate our own beliefs about it.
And so you're saying to break that is what's the truth then?
It's the same principle. How do you apply the gospel? How do you apply just what you shared, which I think is so powerful, and what Tom is talking about in terms of moving towards, even when you physically can't, but how do you move towards instead of away and have humility? Can we take a minute to talk about that?
Yeah, how do you move towards when you can't necessarily physically?
Yeah. Because I think that is the biggest challenge. We want to withdraw and we want to pull away and we want to just even say, well, this is just the reality of what it is. When actually it's not the reality of what it is. Because it's just a system that's been imposed. The reality is what we believe and how we interact with it.
So you're saying that although I have to be, to some measure, physically isolated, I don't have to be isolated. I don't have to be, either I'm not physically able to be with people, I don't actually have to be isolated from them.
It has to be true.
Why?
Otherwise, how does Paul talk to the Philippians about this? He's in isolation. How does he talk to the church that way?
And he says, because I have you in my heart, he says. So we often use that expression for people that have died. And we say, but they're still in my heart. And this is far less extreme than that. But the idea is there, right? That I have you in my heart. We would say that about somebody that we're very close to, that we really love. I have you in my heart. You're in my heart. My heart is for you. But we can practice that wherever we have love.
Wherever we have love. So we commented on our first, I think, real-time experiencing this. And it wasn't COVID-19. Remember? When you were mad? Because
I was going to say, was this our first,
fight?
Yeah,
probably.
I know I've told a number of people this fight a while back.
I need an update on it.
Do you remember this?
No.
I think I told you this a while back. I remember this because this was my first big lesson into real love and friendship, actually. Because I remember a time where you and we spent quite a bit of time together, and then there was a time where we just couldn't spend quite as much time together. You were busy, I was busy. You were, I think, getting busier with some work stuff and traveling with your family and things like that. And I remember we just didn't get to see each other as often as I would have liked. And I remember in my past with friends and stuff, having a best friend meant you see each other
all the time,
almost every day. It's just what best friends do, right? And I remember we would go days and days without seeing each other. And I started to go what's with this? Are we just not best friends anymore? Should I get rid of my half of the heart necklace? You know what I mean?
I forgot about those.
You did you actually have?
No, we didn't.
Oh.
That was perfect though.
But yeah, you remember those necklaces. Maybe we did have one of those actually, no. But I remember thinking this is bad. We're not connecting. We're disconnected. We're not hanging out every day. This is bad. Our friendship's going downhill. And this sounds so stupid, but I actually really remember thinking great, this friendship is going to be over.
Over.
And I remember starting to plan the death of our friendship in my mind, like grieving it. It was like, oh, it's another one bites the dust kind of thing. And I remember I sat outside your condo and I gave you the riot act. I'm like, listen, it was like, it felt like a marriage. I was like, if we want to make this work, we got to see each other all the time. We got to put in the time. We're going to be best friends here. And you really hammered it back. And I was like, it was super intense because I was like, whoa, this chick's intense. I remember you were like, listen, you're like, this is not, like, I love you. This is like, I'm not going anywhere, but our friendship doesn't depend on whether we see each other every day or not. Like, I love you and that's not changing. And it doesn't, like, that is not dependent on physically seeing each other. And I remember you said, you just want me to hang out with you every single day. That's what it takes, kind of thing. That's not what it takes. And then I remember you got into the car and I thought, and I even was like, whatever, like, I don't need you, kind of thing. And you went up to your condo and I was like, well, I guess the friendship's over. Like, I just thought that was it, you know? And then I think 2 days later you called me and you're like, so, like, we're gonna have coffee? And I was like, we're gonna have coffee now? And you were just like, yeah, like, we're having coffee. Like, what's the big deal? And here we are, however many years later. But it was for me realizing, like, whoa, like, okay, like, it's not just about physically
Seeing each other.
There's something deeper and there's something more. And it was kind of like, which was the best thing you could have done for me. But it was such a weird thing because for me, it all had to do with time, like putting in your dues,
Yeah.
the necklace.
If you really mean
kind of
this,
thing.
then you're going to spend time with me.
Yeah.
Or people translate that, or you're going to buy me something, or you're going to do this, or whatever it is. And that's hard. One of the hardest things in my life right now is I have to travel all the time for work. And it's
Until COVID rescued you.
I know,
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Exactly.
So glad.
That's
But
so nice.
it sucks. And you're away, and I start to automatically feel like, oh, I'm disconnected, or people aren't thinking about me, or nobody cares. Like, you can just go down this path. And then it's like, wait a second. If what we share is real, if Jesus is real to me, if Jesus is real to you, and that's what we find, that's what our lives are founded on, then that's actually that's not true. And I'm just, because of my own pride right now, removing myself from what's actually existing instead of moving into it. So, what can I do to cultivate that? How can I write a note? How can I just think about a person or be curious and wonder what they're doing and what's taking place in their life? How can I share with them in the midst of it? Because it's ultimately just sharing what Jesus has done for us. So even right now, we don't get to see each other. This is special on Tuesday nights. But, I was saying it was cool on Saturday because I found a lot what sustained me during the day was thinking about how much your friendship means to me. And when I feel alone, that you love me. It's a picture of Jesus' love. It's even what Lauren shared, too, in her example on Sunday morning about getting to see you. So,
and this helps so much because I was talking to a friend this week about this and how we put so much emphasis right now, and I'm totally can be this way, and I was relating with her in this. We put so much emphasis right now on, like when I can finally be with people, when I can finally give somebody a hug or be with people, or even just when the rules start to ease up and I can kind of have people on my porch, we can hang out, we can do this, I'm going to be so much happier. This is going to be great. Or when this all clears up and I can finally be with everyone, I'm going to go from really miserable to so happy. All these little voids in my heart are going to be filled. It's going to be great. And you almost start to see some people and you go, oh, that actually didn't fill everything I thought it was going to. It's almost like a letdown. You're like, oh, I finally got to see this person, and that's it. Like, it's kind of like, you go, what's with that? But this actually addresses that, because it's like, if that's just what it is, then you go, oh. And then you can almost even go, well, I guess Jesus is the answer. Like, and even that's kind of like, okay, Jesus is the answer. And that, what do you even do with that? But what we're saying is, no, Jesus is the answer and more. Like, it's Jesus and more. It's Jesus with each other. Like, it's like you were saying on Saturday. Like, we have that with each other because it's so much more with him. And we can have that not even necessarily having...
So just to clarify, Lisa, you didn't just say it's Jesus plus more being us. You said it's actually us plus Jesus. It's actually that this works through our awareness of Jesus and
Yeah.
following in, let this mind be in you, which was also in him. And that's what we're doing.
Exactly.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, I just wanted to rescue
This is
you
why you're
from-
here. Yes, thanks. Sandy said God's love doesn't have boundaries. That's right.
And John asked above that. John
Oh,
G.
yes, that's right.
asked, is it fair to say that it's a choice between, how did he put it?
In every moment, we have a choice. We either choose Jesus or ourselves.
How about if we said the way of Jesus? Right? And yeah, but yeah,
Yes.
choose Jesus or ourselves. Yeah, I'll do that.
Just to tack on one more thing too, this is actually an opportunity for us to learn how to grow love without being in the physical presence of people,
Yeah.
which is very sustainable.
Yeah.
Because we don't all know if we're all going to be together and meeting on Sunday mornings for the rest of our lives, right? Some people are going to have to move. Some people are going to have to go. Some things are just going to happen. Some people are going to die, like whatever the circumstance is. But actually, today, we have the opportunity to cultivate something that's very, very strong and concrete in the midst of all of this. So what am I going to think about how Jesus sees me, and as a result of my relationship with you and you and you and you and you, and how am I going to grow that? And what am I going to grow tonight about what people are seeing in me? What am I going to believe about what people at Bethel think of me and how they love me? Because if I grow that they love me and that this is founded on something real, it's actually going to fill me. I'm not going to feel lonely. If I grow something else that I'm all alone here in the midst of this,
So,
it gets very lonely.
so is this why, Ashley, that being alone and loneliness aren't the same thing?
They're not the same thing.
And
no.
is this why you can be lonely in a group, or you can be lonely in a marriage, or you can be lonely with your best friend? And it's really why, as a church, we have to always be cultivating. I have you in my heart, and I'm in your heart. That's kind of what communion's all about.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about bringing the gospel into the system, bringing the gospel into. This is what our church is about.
Yeah.
By the way, we are going to try to have communion in a little over a week, like not this coming Sunday, but the following. And we'll tell you more about that. But we want to just say we're still in each other's hearts, even when we're not in each other's presence.
And you disrupt the system through what you believe in your heart, because then you interact with what's happening in a far different way. And that's actually where you blow psychology out of the water, which is pretty awesome. Yeah.
All right. That's our.
Any final thoughts?
We should give people at least a minute to have final thoughts.
Now's your
People are
chance.
trying to type things.
Right. And maybe something like maybe the whole element of systems too. We're not sure what it's going to look like in terms of offering that course now. So maybe it's something we can just even
Right.
talk
We
to.
talked about dysfunctional as welcome being something we were going to offer in May, which is probably
Yeah.
not going to happen. Where we were taking that was actually going to be a course on systems, and we're still trying to develop that.
Yeah. So, and even something if you just want to begin to think about it this week, think about the systems that are at play in your life, right? And if you're like, I don't know what the systems are, think of any point of tension anywhere in your life. And then stop and break down what are the pieces, who's involved, and what is it that I'm believing about each one of them. And that will actually give you an indication and something even to start to work with right there. Or where am I moving away, as we talked about? Where am I withdrawing? And not in the physical sense, because I know that's what's happening, but where am I withdrawing in my heart? That's going to give you an indication of some sort of system and where the gospel needs to illuminate it.
So just to reiterate, which direction does humility take us? Humility takes us towards and in, and pride takes us away and out. What goes with humility? Empathy. And what goes with pride, rejection, abandonment.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
okay. Isn't I just want to say this. Isn't the gospel cool?
It's amazing.
Like 2000 years ago, Paul's writing this stuff and it's so on because the gospel's real, because Jesus is real, because love is real. It's so on. It's just awesome. Okay, gonna say goodnight. Good night, all.
From your after hours crew. Until next time.